Greetings, gentlemen. I hear we have some. Oh, Ann's here too. I hear we have some sad news. Well, sad for us because someone's no longer with us. But. So Nir sent us an email today that Leon Krier passed away.
Yep. I just heard about it this morning. He passed away 2 days ago, apparently. He was very dear to me because when I was writing my book, I went through every single one of the streams in the modernist world and traditional world, and his was the only voice of reason. He just used arithmetic and common sense to make his points. No fancy language. It was all experience-based, and yet he carried with him, those are the images. He carried with him this postmodernist idea, modernist idea that you have to come up with your own style. And he and his brother Rob actually did develop a postmodernist style back in the 80s, which he then applied very much to stuff he was working on thereafter. So that the Kayala style is really a kind of a Krier Latin American style. Poundbury is kind of a Krier English style. This building here that we see right now is in the University of Miami in Coral Gables, and it is definitely a Krier concoction, but it really works. The spaces work, and it even survived the American architectural production and construction mill so that it feels right. It's a good building. It's a nice building to be next to be around, to be in. And there is the, in Florida, in Windsor, Florida, that community hall that he made, completely Krier. I'm not close to my photographs right now.
Yeah, Ara, can you show Kayala?
Kayala, how is that spelled?
Cayala.
And I want Nir to talk some more, but let me inform our readers that Leon Krier is responsible for an entirely new town in Guatemala, Cayala, Guatemala, which is a completely new town. It looks like it's been there since the 15th century, but it's entirely new. It's gorgeous. So this is Leon's, perhaps his greatest contribution.
And Poundbury also.
Yeah. Poundbury is pure Krier with only a few buildings designed by other excellent architects. But the whole urban design and the planning is Leon Krier, and many of the buildings.
The thing about Cayala is it's recognizably Latin American, and I don't know enough about Guatemalan architecture. I've really not been to Antigua. I went instead to Quetzaltenango because it had a longer name and because it had some features that I found uniquely significant, and I felt vindicated by my choice. But Cayala, and I hadn't met Maria and Pedro, who built it together with Leon. Cayala is it's very, very well resolved. And they have a cathedral there, which they built, and there's a building by Economakis, Richard Economakis, who's one of our colleagues from Notre Dame. all of that, all of the features you see there are both economical and expressive. The same thing that you see in Poundbury. I think that Leon's, intellectually, Leon's biggest urban contribution was his recognition of res publica and res and the public space and the commercial space. How's it called? Res publica and res economica, and then civitas. That in a single image shows the parts of what makes a community and what he calls the true city. And it is true. There it is. And it sits on a grid that is as simple as imaginable. Not necessarily regular, because that's immaterial, but it has all the parts that you want to have in a town. And in general, his seemingly naive images that he drew, his drawings, really conveyed the meat and potatoes of everything that you really need to know about architecture and urbanism. And he did it uniquely. He was very generous. He was always good to me. I met him in 2017. He picked me up from the airport in Palma de Mallorca. We spent half a day together. We had lunch. We visited his house. He had a huge wall of books in his space in the house with a piano in the middle and a model airplane somewhere there. It was, in my mind, the ideal kind of studio space, or at least the library and music part of the studio, and something to emulate by all architects, really. And he knew everything that was there to know when it came to urban stuff, top to bottom, inside out, very, very well. And I was amazed how his personal style actually worked. It had all the neuroaesthetic elements that you need. It was, generally speaking, a classical style. There was nothing vernacular about it. It was a freestanding style, much like Art Deco is a freestanding style. Not too many people have followed it. I think it would be interesting to see subsequent generations. Mm-hmm. Maybe people are afraid of using it. Like you see in Kailad, it works. Like you see in the Windsor building, it works. But I think the biggest loss is his great heart. He was really everybody's grandfather and urban father figure and all that good stuff. And I don't think there's a single person who knew him who's not shedding a tear right now.
I heard he played a mean piano, and he used to play piano like for hours a day or something.
He was a professional concert level. He would play Chopin, Beethoven.
Yeah.
And
he was actually supposed to play at the AVN conference that I just came back from, the Academia Vivarium Novum Hereditas Urbium. He was supposed to play to accompany Annabelle Cardron, who is a professional level. She doesn't perform professionally, but she's a professional level opera singer. I have never heard opera sung that well from so close in my life. It was a private concert of the top level. You don't get it at the Kennedy Center. Mm. It was very nice. Mm-hmm. And he was supposed to play. He was replaced by Jonathan Wetherill, who did an outstanding job. Everything was prima vista, first sight reading. That conference was, in my humble opinion, the most significant conference of 2025. And it was a genuine gathering of traditionalists. There were very few people who weren't. And their work was notably less appealing. It was very interesting to see. But it was 30 of the leading traditionalist architects in the world today. And it was a real honor and extremely humbling for me to represent the CPI there and show our work as a peer. Obviously, for me, it was a high point career-wise. But Leon was missed, and
I'm curious. Do you guys know? Did Leon Krier partner with like a local architect when he would work in different places around?
Always.
Yes, always, because he did not have an architecture degree.
Oh, really? He didn't?
No, he left the University of Stuttgart. He was getting his degree with Sterling, I think.
Whoa.
And he got fed up and left before he got his degree. So he always had to partner with somebody local to sign the blueprints. Nir, what do you know about this?
He always did. I think that on the urban level, he just didn't want to deal with the bureaucracy. And so that's something we do as well. We always team up with local architects when it comes to permitting and so on. Let somebody else, who knows what they're doing, run the bureaucracy. At the same time, we do very well, actually. We generally get more than we ask for when we work with permitting officials, because we love them and we recognize their goodness. Those people are really working from the goodness of their heart, doing the work they're doing. They genuinely want to see stuff happen beautifully, the best they can.
Yeah. And then they allow they permit monstrosities because they're fashionable, and the media praise them. I want to go back to Leon. He was very proud. He told me that he spent a lot of money, more than he should have, on getting the best concert Bösendorfer grand piano for his house. Not the baby grand, the grand concert piano.
It was a grand, It's a full size grand. It sounded very good. I didn't like Bösendorfer. They were actually heavy. My piano teacher had a Bösendorfer, and I never liked it. But yeah, I wish I had a piano here. We don't have one right now. We actually sold it to make space in the apartment in DC when we rented it out, and we didn't get a new one since, but it's coming up. Music is coming up. Actually, for what it's worth, I recently reconnected with my rock band in Israel from when I was 23. And it turns out that the leader of the band, who is a bass player, is a professional music academic. And the singer, the young woman, she was 18 at the time, has been for the last 10 years the head of music at Harvard. So our little convocation here, it's really top of its class in the world, in case you were wondering.
Yeah, okay, back to poor Leon. This is a shock to me because he was only a few years older than me, really, in his prime of life. He was not that old.
No, and he seemed to be in prime of life. I know that he went through Irene's cancer with her recently. She had something similar, and I was sure he was going to vanquish it. But I think that Rob's passing hit him harder. I think he was getting very depressed. because he thought the world was going in the wrong directions.
But it is. But we have to be brave.
And for some reason, he allowed himself, and I had conversations with him about this, about being depressed 2 years ago, before the beginning of COVID, and then beginning of COVID, he was depressed, and was like, what the hell? You're on the top of your game. Everybody loves you. But I think he had a part to him. I was just in a class at the CPI. I'm going to go back after this, where Robert Adam was speaking, and he shared a tribute to Leon. And Robert calls him the architect who resigned more than anyone else from projects. He was a serial resigner. That's what he called him. And he did. He resigned from every single project he was on and always got called back because there was nobody who could replace him.
Well, I admire Leon, and I'm very sad at his passing. He was extremely kind to me, despite the fact that I'm one of Christopher Alexander's boys. And he had a terrible relationship with Christopher.
Really?
It was like Robert Oppenheimer and Edward Teller. They couldn't stand each other. Two great people who couldn't stand each other. But Leon was very kind, very nice to me. And so I try to help him as much as I can.
Did Leon have a good relationship with any of the other architects? Because
Yeah.
The first time I heard of Leon was in 2013. I was at a Peter Eisenman lecture, and he was talking about like all these weirdos they want to bring science into architecture. Like
he was very good friends with Eisenman.
Oh,
surprisingly
really?
enough.
Yeah, and that's where I learned that he played piano. Because Eisenman was saying that a lot of architects, they have like a second passion, and he's like, Leon Krier plays the piano for hours a day, and he was saying, I write books or something.
Yeah, look, Nir can tell you that among the strictly classical architects, Leon got along with almost everybody very well, right?
Yeah, I mean, he was loved by everyone. He was universally loved. He always had a nice thing to say. I mean, I showed him the projects I was working on. I wanted to bring him in on projects. We never got one big enough where we could hire him, but his fees were exceedingly low. I really don't know how he did it. I think that to me, one of his most inspiring projects was what he recently did for this place in Iran, for this island off in the Straits of Hormuz.
Yeah.
That was like so amazing. He did it together with this architect, Iranian architect in DC.
Yeah, Nir, do you know the name so Ara can look it up? I forget the name.
I think we can do it. I have it here somewhere. I can look it up. But there's also, let's say, we're calling it Iranian Island.
And I don't know. I've seen the renderings. I don't know if it has construction has begun.
No. It's never going to be built. Or Karg Island.
Karg?
Yeah. Images. Let's see if there's anything that has images of it.
Yeah, that's it.
There are some really magnificent images that he produced.
Dealing with
he did it with this guy in DC, who's very, very capable, lovely guy.
Who's this DC architect?
I don't.
If I typed
his name exactly.
It would bring up. I don't know if these are the right images.
We worked with him, and then I forgot his name. Sorry about that.
No, good.
Yeah, those are the best images. Those are the best images.
Yeah,
Is that in Anta?
Yeah. Open that full screen, and maybe we can get the name of the other architect.
This text is not legible.
No.
Oh, Leon Krier and Jamshid Saperi?
Yeah,
Saperi.
Oh.
Saperi.
Yeah.
So I have a basic question. So was Leon Krier hired by the King's Foundation to do Poundbury?
Yes.
Well, he was hired by the king. He had a personal relationship with the king. They were close friends. And I think the king was also friends with Christopher Alexander, basically, right?
Sorry? Yeah, His Majesty King Charles had very close friendship with both Leon Krier and Christopher Alexander, and had to keep them
apart.
Otherwise, they would go for each other's throat.
And maybe Poundbury was before the King's Foundation existed.
No.
Yes, it started in 1988. It started a long time ago. It took a long time to get through whatever they were doing. They only started building it in the 2000s, and now it's getting finished.
Yeah, I've been there. It's fantastic. But so now, so the king, someone asked me the question, what happened? Is the King's Foundation a permanent foundation? Like if...
Yeah, it's the Prince's Foundation changed name to the King's Foundation.
Right. And then it will keep supporting traditional architecture getting created?
In principle, except that Ben Bolger, who runs it, is also a Christopher Alexander student. So I think that they're going to support what they support, how they support. And it's very political. Anything close to the king or the prince is extremely political. And I think people pay a price for it, both inside the organization and outside, for that aspect of it. But it is what it is, and we're very grateful for the king's general support of new traditional architecture and urbanism.
Well, I want to make a public statement because we're public. Both His Majesty King Charles and myself, we could see that there was very little difference between Christopher Alexander, humanity in architecture, and Leon Krier's classical type of human architecture. The distance was much smaller than they thought. Individually they couldn't stand each other, but
I think that's, I would differ with the king on that. I think that they are very disparate. I think that Christopher Alexander's approach was fundamentally a modern way of looking at the world, and Krier's was more grounded in classical humanism. But, things are what they are, and we're talking about Leon at this point. So I think that Leon's real humanity, he was a real mensch, and he was a real beautiful supporting individual. And you can see from his beautiful little drawings and everything, he was thinking holistically all the time. That there are very few architects out there that you can actually point that out in their work.
Well, Leon was a very good friend of Robert Stern of New York City. And while Stern was dean of Yale Architecture School, which is a rabidly modernist deconstructivist, Stern, as an excellent classical architect, he brought in Leon to be the Jefferson professor for a year. And Leon taught for a year, and at least one class of students learned real architecture that year.
Yeah.
But it was only a 1 year special visiting position, and not a permanent one.
Yeah, I think that Leon was instrumental in Driehaus in deciding on who gets the prize. He gave his library to Notre Dame as well several years ago.
Other than Notre Dame, are there any universities that are teaching traditional form language architecture?
Yes, there are two major schools, major programs. One is Utah Valley University, where Brandon Rowe is a leader. He's not the dean of it yet, but he will be probably. And there is John Hay in Benedictine College in Missouri. In addition to those programs, you have non-academic programs such as the Institute of Classical Architecture and Art, the American College of Building Arts, which teach classical architecture, or orders at least, within the organization, and of course the Classic Planning Institute. Abroad, you have summer schools, which really are more amateurish level. They're for aficionados, but they're not rigorous like we are and the other programs.
Well,
But they
however,
are funnels. And now you have the new Aesthetic City Academy, which is sort of a funnel for the CPI, basically, so that you can see stuff online, and Ruben does a really great job with that.
yeah, this
There's
is
also
Ruben
a
Hand.
Makers Collective. That's another nonprofit that Ruben's connected to. They're doing a summer school.
Yeah, there's several summer schools. I think that's in Boston.
No, this one's going
there-
to be in South Carolina.
or South Carolina, wherever they are. And you also have a program that is sort of wobbly in Norway, in Trondheim, and the technical university there, run by
Branko.
Mitrovic, who arguably is one of the greatest teachers that we have. What he teaches his students in a semester, nobody else does, not even us at the CPI. He's really, really good. And there is at Cambridge, John Simpson is working on a program that is coming from the classical architecture program at the School of Architecture at Cambridge University that is working towards becoming an accredited program in traditional architecture.
Well, yeah, these are rays of hope, and I do not want to underplay the summer programs because they're rays of hope in an otherwise
absolutely
completely bleak landscape. And, Europe is totally fanatic. Forget it. In the United States, you can play around a little bit, but Europe's totally fanatic. So
they do sound fanatical. They are a little bit fundamentalist.
Talking about the different jurisdictions, I noticed like the permitting process. So I noticed when you work, like one city is very different from the other. For example, here in LA, an architect can submit structural plans if it's one story. Even any kind of designer can submit structural plans for what you don't need any stamp. But in Burbank and Glendale, you need a civil engineer or a structural engineer or a licensed architect or somebody who's licensed to stamp the structural drawings. But in LA, you don't. The only caveat is the corners. You need to have 4 feet without any openings. Every corner of the building, it needs to be one story in LA, and every corner of the building, 4 feet without any. And I'm realizing that those corners, they need to be shear walls. And one time, I was showing Nikos some of my designs, and he was like, the windows and the doors too close to the edges. And I think he was saying it more for the experiential reasons, but even structurally, like in the corners, you leave more space, and structurally it works better too. And it's not just to make the contractor's job easier, but it makes the contractor do his job better because now he's putting a shear wall in every corner, and the building is much more rigid and safe. And I'm looking at Leon Crier's buildings, and a lot of his openings are also centered, and it's like a different design methodology that also works structurally. I mean, I don't think you guys are arguing from the structural point of view, more from the experience point of view, but it's like it works that way too.
But it seems like it's just, when I look at how New York City is getting developed in Brooklyn, my sister lives there and she's had an apartment there for 30 years. This is what's going up outside the East River on Kent Avenue.
Do you know who's designing those?
And it's like, what's so amazing is the buildings are like empty, and they're just like this amazing, bits of, you can barely see the East River now. And they're just bits of like extruded.
It's not bits, it's just giant pieces of garbage. Just
egg cartons extruded, it's amazing. And you get the feeling it's all about monetizing or holding capital. That's what's building it. It's not the user experience at all, like Poundbury. Somehow in big architectural construction, user experience, there's nothing on the spreadsheet for that. So that's not what's getting built in America now. It's mind-blowing to me how it's
pure trash, and it will only last 30 years. Then I'll have to tear it down because it's structurally unstable after 30 years.
Yeah, you have to. True. And what's funny too, this is a hospital in New York City. It's a children's hospital, and they realized it was threatening, so they hired an architect, and Toyota gave them a free Prius. And they created the puppy by the front door so the kids would feel happy walking into the hospital. Is that wild? You don't have to do that in Poundbury, Isn't that amazing, guys, what they had to build? Because the architecture's failing and the parents can't find the door, and
There's a firm called
the modernist efforts are so pathetic. It's really something, like these are intelligent people by all accounts. How is it possible that they bought into this nonsense so totally?
If it wasn't for you guys, I would have never seen it.
They're the ayatollahs of aesthetics, these guys. It's like, what's with it?
Well, they're in the system, they're making money, they have tenured positions, they get commissions. So it is in their interest to continue this corrupt system. Look, Ara, Nir came up with something that's very important. Let's discuss it. The aesthetic, emotional appeal of the geometry of placing the window coincides with the tectonic stability. They're not independent. Most people think it's independent. I can put the window where I want to. Is like making a drawing. No, if you go with your basic gut feelings of stability, tectonic stability, visually, it coincides with the forces. That's why traditional architecture, which was done purely intuitively, is so much more stable against earthquakes. Okay,
and not just stable; it's more sustainable.
Yes.
And that's what we don't talk about. We talk about sustainability, never considering the human experience.
Yeah,
well, there is a $1 billion racket today talking about sustainability, adding a layer of rare earth metals that will have to come from Mongolia on your curtain wall, glass curtain wall. That's not sustainable. That's stupid.
I really love this whole business of rain screens.
That's a big thing.
Can I use bad language
here? No. We will get censored.
What in God's good name are rain screens? And the fallacies that are being promoted as scientific truth, structural truth, architectural truth, really are mind-boggling. Nobody's calling them on this, and the whole setup is really, I find it exceedingly strange. So it was really a pleasure to be among people who actually design beautiful things, can do it, they know what it looks like, they can knock it out with grace, and I'm very grateful for the Academia Vivarium Novum people. You really should bring somebody from the Academia Vivarium Novum to speak here about what they do. This is the real deal. These are people who are actually interested in a humanistic future, and they're doing something about it. It's not blah, blah.
I know some of the people that are working on a lot of those high rises that are going up in Brooklyn and a lot of the developments that are happening there. And they're very talented people that I went to grad school with. There's a firm called Shop Architects that got a lot of commissions to do
Shop
a lot of
Architects.
those. Yeah.
I've seen their projects on Arch Daily.
Yeah. So like a lot of talented people from grad school that learned a lot of different software, learned a lot of different techniques, and like you were saying, facade strategies and rain screens and scripting and parametricism.
And
they're very talented.
Friends? These are your friends?
Yeah, I haven't talked to them in like a decade, but yeah, I know some people.
So I would refrain from giving my opinion.
They just haven't been exposed, and I wasn't exposed. I mean, so I was in the urban design program. These people were in the advanced architectural program in the same building across the hall. But ours was kind of, and I back then in 2013, I was looking at their program and being like, I wish I was there. I don't like all this urban analysis, extensive slide analysis. Yeah. They're doing really cool poetic stuff. Oh, we're doing this crazy structure that touches the ground in a weird way, and it looks like a big heavy thing floating in the air, and we're writing poetry about our buildings.
Yeah,
but then now I see the value in it. And what we were doing in the urban program.
That makes users sick. It gives us anxiety, and long-term anxiety destroys the immune resistance. The immune system of the body lowers resistance, and you get sick. It's as simple as that. But to get back to something that Nir said, we have this platform. Okay, now we have this platform, the video. We can choose to invite one by one the people who spoke at the Nir's conference in Italy. And we would love to show their works. That's what we're here for. We're providing an educational outlet for that many young architects have no idea about.
But we also have the handbook of neuroscience in the built environment that's coming out in about a month. And it has 50 authors from 4 continents, 30 chapters about how new understandings in biology explain why traditional architecture is sustainable and works through the centuries. We can, but most of them, as Nikos said, most of the firms don't know the science is there. They just don't know it's there at all. They don't know about the plugin for Photoshop 3M visual attention software. They don't know it's there.
And I imagine they probably resist it in the beginning, because once you see it, you can't unsee it. And then once you start seeing that there's this big thing where some certain buildings are anxiety inducing that we used to try to mimic, and then once you see it, it's like, man, you can't unsee it, and it's a paradigm shift, like Ann was saying.
You actually see your brain is telling you not to look at the modern building, to look up in the sky, to look somewhere else. Or like with that hospital I showed you, they had to put a sculpture of a puppy standing on his nose, with something on his nose to make it look interesting.
So there's this Le Corbusier floor plan that I think it's like a nice floor plan, but then when you look at the building, the whole thing is like floating in the air. It's like,
no, come on, Ara, get rid of this. Get rid of this. Show us the nice Leon Krier building. And I have a story from last week about the handbook of neuroscience, because I was involved in an email exchange with some friends, very, very good architects, urban planners. And they said, well, when are we going to get the public to realize what good urban design is like? So I said, the revolution is coming. Look at this. This is going to be published in one month. The Handbook of Neuroscience, the Routledge Handbook of Neuroscience. And
going down, scroll down, you'll see it.
I gave the link, and I said, look, there are like 35 chapters, and each one is fantastic. And this will really
next page.
Make a big change. And one of our old friends.
There it is, right there.
Yeah, that's it. One of our old friends answered back sarcastically. He said, come on, Nikos, you think one academic book is going to change the profession? Come on. So he was very sarcastic.
All three of you have a chapter, right?
Yep.
And Ann is the editor.
Ann is
one of the editors.
And the reason I think they asked me to edit this book was because the second edition of Cognitive Architecture the book right here, has 36 images of eye-tracked architecture in it. And they wanted to learn more about that. So this book has the images of, what it's like when you eye-track architecture.
I have, I think, your previous book, the Urban Experience and Design or something.
Yeah, and I did that with Justin as well. Yeah, we did
that's a conference procedure.
That was a conference.
Individual chapters. It's like the handbook, but individual chapters. Each chapter was a presentation at this conference, which I attended as well.
And this book talks about how the brain is just hardwired to see faces, because the figural primitive for the brain is by the third trimester in utero, the fetus can recognize the upright and upside down face, because the patterns for the neural patterns for that are imprinted in your brain before birth. So more of the brain, your brain is as big as it is, 30% is visual processing, and more of the visual processing is face perception than anything else.
I think Nir disagrees with you.
That's why this building works.
Yeah, okay. Look, I want to go back to my friend who dismissed the Handbook of Cognitive Architecture. And when after I got upset, I thought he has a point. Does the profession pay attention to a single academic book that comes out? The truth is no, they don't pay attention. So Ann and the rest of us, how do we leverage the book to affect the profession?
Well, I think believe it or not, I'm meeting with Justin Hollander tomorrow to discuss that, because I think after going to the AIA conference, we did have a booth on the AIA conference floor, June 5th and 6th this month. I'm seeing interest explode. The interest is exploding, and young people your age and younger are very interested in stress, health and well-being. And the AIA is actually even talking about health and well-being now. How can architects promote health and well-being in the way they work? So we have an entree now, I think, that I never saw in the 20th century. And I'm seeing it now suddenly take off.
I think the move with the face-like facade is if it lends itself to it, you go for it and you make it the face. But if the building is like a very large building with more scattered facade, you don't force the face. Maybe it's like if it lends itself to it, you express it as a face. But if it's not, I don't know, because I mean,
but everything though. This is Henry Ford built this in memory of his mother and mother-in-law, this church. But everything, it's bilateral, symmetrical, top, middle, and bottom.
Yeah.
Because our perception hasn't changed for 40,000 years, we're not really built for seeing people. We're not really built for seeing buildings. We're built for seeing people. And we don't have a modern perception. What's shocking is how the car companies study that. I can send you.
True. Yeah.
Because they want to sell their models.
I can send you a Wall Street Journal article from 2007 all about how cars got angry.
Oh yeah.
As people were feeling more threatened, so the cars got angrier. So they really study the front end.
And there's a Tesla smile sometimes with the car has the windows
look
at
eyes. And smiling.
Well, look, as long as architects can sell buildings based on pure public relations and propaganda, there is no need for architects to go into the science of attraction, whereas cars sell through psychology, right?
Right. Cars sell for psychology, and they just study it to an extent that's shocking. It's getting a little scary. And I'm a little worried that architecture may disappear. That AI is going to come over, and it's just going to.
Why are you worried? The architecture of dominant architecture is useless. It's harmful. Why are you scared of it disappearing?
Because I like working with Ara. That's why I'm worried.
No, I don't think it'll disappear. I think architects using AI might replace architects not using AI, but definitely AI won't replace architects.
I think that's going to happen.
Look, we have saved Ara. Ara has a fantastic new education. He will be prepared for the architecture of the future, which is human scaled.
Right.
It's the jerks who are his old colleagues who are building skyscrapers in Brooklyn now who will be out of a job because AI can do those plans in 30 seconds. They will be out of a job.
AI is going to come and it's going to change the profession.
Actually, we use AI already.
Yep.
And it's not going to change anything. Because what academia and practice currently, for the most part, call architecture really isn't architecture. Real architecture is making places for people, and no two places on earth are the same. So you really need to use a lot of inventiveness, and inventiveness is not innovation.
Right.
Inventiveness is taking an existing technology and putting it in a new context. For example, Doric order is a technology. Ionic order is a technology. Corinthian order is a technology. And so are all the other aspects of the classical method. And we take them, which together comprise a method, and apply them in a new context wherever it is that you're doing your work. So we actually invent a huge amount. We all, every project, every traditional project goes through a huge amount of invention as we take all that knowledge and adjust it for the location and for the uses and the client and everything else. So in using AI, we have been using it. We take the whole project brief, throw it into AI, and it tells us adequately what the general public mind, which includes the client, thinks it's going to get. So we already know what the client is expecting, given the inputs. And all we need to do is take those hallucinatory images, which we use as like a flavor. It's like a picture on a menu. You can't eat the picture. All right? And it's not much better than the actual description, the actual word description of the fennel and the cream and the this and that goes into is much more mouthwatering than an image of sushi. So we take those images and we work with them. We do not show them to the client. But in order to get the right image out of the AI, you need to know a huge amount of architecture and precedence. So you got to be an expert to begin with in order to use the AI properly. Otherwise, you get GIGL, garbage in, garbage out. So it's a flavor of the year. There's no intelligence whatsoever in it. The fear factor of it taking over life and everything else, you can by extrapolation get there, but history is not an extrapolation of the past. Never was.
No.
So it's so full of fatal flaws in thinking and falsehoods. And by the way, for what it's worth, I'm in touch with a guy called, where's his book? Christopher DiCarlo, who wrote a book called Making a God, very similar to Noam Harari's Homo Deus. And he interviewed me, and we're talking about human-machine rules. Because at the end of the day, AI is not a standalone human event. We have been doing artificial intelligence, which is basically technology. Technology means knowing how to build, the knowledge of construction, the knowledge of putting stuff together. We've been doing that for about 10,000 years, I think now, chipping stones. It started with chipping rocks and to get, sharp edges and flakes and such. Whatever ideas we apply to any new technology, by definition, has to apply all the way back to the first technology and be valid. That's how you test it. You don't move forward into something where you don't know where you came from. So it's patent nonsense run by people who have no interest other than their own benefit.
What is this, a book or an article? Making a God?
Yeah, it's a book.
So
building a God, maybe? Building a God, sorry.
Well, okay. I think it's time to sign off. But before we do that, I don't want our audience to get the false impression. Some of us are working with AI to promote human scale architecture, because AI supports what we are doing, every one of us, and Nir, myself. 100% support coming from AI if you use it correctly. The intelligent human using AI in an intelligent way. It supports us, and it totally condemns what we condemn. Those faceless structures. Exactly. That comes from AI.
So this just shows, using AI, you start to see people differently. A BAC student did this. It just shows that the new building, the new Mass College of Art, built in 2017 or something, students aren't going to be able to see where the entrance is, whereas the traditional building in Virginia that's 250 years old, people can find it immediately. And your brain is hardwired to ignore the new building that exists because of public funding, whereas the traditional building, they're going to keep upgrading that and keep maintaining it because what's so interesting, it's beautiful. What's so interesting about that too is how your brain changes. Like I'll say, hey, Ara, you want to meet me for tea in front of the brick building? I won't even think of having tea in front of this building. You see what I'm saying? Did you see that? Well, it changes your brain function.
The important thing, that picture is worth 1,000 words, and many of us have been working for decades to give that message, and here AI made that scan in 10 seconds, and you see it, and it registers. So clever use of the technologies helps us, not the opposition. The opposition is trying...
Sorry, yes, AI is definitely not to be feared, because it's like people on the phone were like, oh, they didn't want the cell phones and they didn't want the internet, and it's like, but sometimes I feel like meeting someone across the Walt Disney Concert Hall it's like a nice, like sometimes a contemporary building can be interesting. Like the Walt Disney it created something. I mean, maybe he broke all the rules and like really forced
time to end this video. Come on, Ara.
Something about the swirling gestures.
Who's swirling gestures?
Frank Gehry.
Gary's at the Walt Disney Concert Hall.
I'm really sorry. I don't really think that that's a thing. I just want to show you, if you don't mind. Yes. This is Windsor Community Hall by Leon Krier.
Yeah.
I used to be a big fan of Frank Gehry until I realized what he was doing, and God bless him. If you want leaky structures, you go to Frank Lloyd Wright and Frank Gehry, and I suppose that many architects with the first name Frank do leaky stuff. But anyways, thank you very much for this lovely conversation. I think that you're very lucky, Mr. Hovsepyan, to be speaking with Ann and Nikos.
And you
are you're great.
And myself and people, like-minded people like us, because we are the future. The alternative is an ugly, horrific dystopia, and I know you don't want that.
Yeah, no, I'm definitely seeing it. Incorporating what you guys are saying, like I'm seeing my latest projects my projects that I'm most passionate about. There's it's like an extra layer on it, like with the ornament and the articulation, and it's like an extra filter over. It's not bland anymore. There's
something Ara, if that's how you express it, you fail to learn from us. The life comes from the inside. It's not stuck on top. It's not an extra layer.
No, it's true. It's true.
It is redone from the inside out.
Yeah, it's true.
So it changes everything.
I was just looking at
that's the difference between a mathematician and an architect. An architect is practical, and a mathematician is poetic.
I was just looking at this top layer that's brand new. I mean, so it's like something just visually. There's something additional. There's some, but I mean, I was just referring to this.
The stuff that's on the outside is for the street, and the stuff that's on the inside is for the spaces. And the rules are the same for here and for there. We all want to get a multifractal environment with a dimensionality of 1.3 to 1.5 overall on average, and a beauty scale appropriate to the building or the space. So There it is.
It's a very complex thing, actually. It's like the interiority has its thing, the exteriority, the relationship to the street, the relationship with itself, the
It's
relationship
very
with the inhabitants.
simple. It's very
It
simple.
can be, but I think, I mean, I don't know. When you really get to the process of doing it, it's a
take the
complex
classes
process.
at the CPI, and in a few weeks you'll be drawing authentically, and listen. You're a designer. I'm a designer. I learned this in 100 hours. I've been designing traditional buildings ever since, with no effort whatsoever. I mean, it's fun. It's a really fun engagement because the fractality of the shapes is producing pleasure in your brain while you're drawing them.
Yeah, it is. It is. I have been drawing, the orders like and a bunch of classical buildings in my sketchbook. It's like it's completely changed when I'm sketching now. But yeah, it is. It's
nice.
Like you were saying, it does release endorphins when you're drawing the orders and really thinking about. It's crazy. Like the Doric is masculine and bulky, and the Corinthian is very slender, and the Ionic is more feminine. It's crazy. And then when you have them in one building, they start communicating with each other, the different columns and the different pediments, and it's a really rich. It's a really rich language in architecture that's difficult to mimic with other styles.
I showed you our work that we've been doing in Canada, right?
Yeah.
That's in Canada, the large building.
Yeah.
Well,
we have seen it before.
The street view and everything. Yeah, I'm sure. Okay. Thank you very much. I'm going back to our classroom now. This was an honor to serve.
Thank you guys.
Call me again, please. I love this.
Me too.
Dankeschön. Ann, it's so nice to see you. You look good. It's summertime. I don't know. You're relaxing more. You're not writing books.
Talk soon, guys.
All right. God bless. Take care.
All right, everybody. See you later.
See you.